Thank you all for joining us on this very busy end of the semester. So let me introduce myself. Yate Che Jani Ingram Yanishe Naanis Digi Tachini Nishle Bilagana Bashis Chin Kinlachini Dashis Che Bilagana Dashis Nali. So good afternoon, and I hope everyone is having a good end of the semester and isn't too crazy, but maybe this talk might help a little bit. I don't know, we'll see. So this is a presentation I've given actually a couple times. Recently at the ACES meeting, there was a pre-workshop that is a program through ACES called Guiding Pathways or something, and it's really to help Indigenous folks who want to go into the academic world. And so I gave this to a group, and I learned even some more things from some of the folks that were in the room, so it was really good. So what I'm hoping is that folks will somehow stop me when you have a question, and I'm going to try and pause in between different sections, and certainly we can have a discussion at the end. But, you know, sometimes I know for myself, sometimes questions pop into your mind, and then when you wait to the end, they have popped out of your mind. And so I just want to be, you know, as helpful as possible. So, so let's get started. So if I can get this to move. Okay. No, sorry, this went funny. Okay, so again, as an Indigenous person, it's very useful, I think, for even non-Indigenous people to get an understanding of where the speaker, you know, where they are in life and where they came from in life. So that's a little background about myself. So by training, I am an analytical chemist, born and raised in Arizona. My parents are shown there. I'm from Kingman, whether that surprises you or not. I'm not sure if you've been to Kingman, but it's a small town on your way to Las Vegas, so in the northwest corner of the state. So my parents are shown there. I'm Navajo through my mom. So our clans, if you didn't pick up on it, the Nanashteji is kind of charcoal streak. So sometimes I think about a football player with the black streak under their eyes. And that was my grandmother's side. And then my grandpa was Kinlachi, which is the Red House clan. And then my dad, as you might be able to tell, is a Bilagana, or a white person. His mom was first generation German. And then his dad was a European mix. And my parents actually met at NAU back when it was Arizona State College at Flagstaff. Both of them teachers. My dad taught high school math. My mom taught second grade for the longest time. And so that definitely molded who I am. I first started in college at the community college, Yavapai College in Prescott, where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go into engineering. So I took, you know, the prereqs that you would take to go into engineering, which included 4 semesters of chemistry, and had an awesome chemistry instructor for all of those classes. And he really was the reason I believe that I am a chemist today, because my high school chemistry was terrible. I did meet my future husband at Yavapai, and he was from Las Cruces, New Mexico. So we sort of decided to go back to Las Cruces. So I got my bachelor's degree at New Mexico State University, where I did start out in engineering and then moved into chemistry there. But it was clear I needed to go on to graduate school. So I ended up going to the University of Arizona to get my degree, and definitely did not want to go into academics, partly because my advisor just seemed to be married to chemistry, and she was the only female in the department, so she also had to deal with some of that kind of things. And both my parents, as I said, were teachers, and I really didn't want to teach So I applied and went to the Idaho National Lab as a staff scientist, and I was there for 12 years. But I did get the teaching bug and the working with students bug. And so in 2002, came to NAU. And so I was a little bit different than maybe many of you in that I was at this Department of Energy lab, had written grants and gotten funding as a PI. So I started at NAU in 2002 as an associate professor, but without tenure because I had not taught. They didn't accept my Sunday school teaching. So I had to kind of prove myself there. So I did apply for tenure and then sort of went through the system and just recently was promoted to a Regents professor. So that's a little bit about me. So this talk talks about Hozho, and probably for those of you that have been around NACP for a while, or even my brothers and sisters from the Diné Nation know what it means, but I'll just give a little bit of background on it. So as it says, it loosely translates as peace, balance, beauty, harmony. So that balance word is really where I was thinking about this. You know, it's really to be, as it says, one or in balance with the world around you. And as we all know, in this wonderful profession we have, it takes some work to make sure that you are in balance with the world around you. And so what I'm going to talk about today a bit is how to balance the responsibilities that most tenure track professors have, which includes research, teaching, and service. And really, how do you, how can you be successful with that? And as it says, more importantly, have Hozho or have balance. It can be definitely that it feels like a teeter-totter sometime, trying to get things to be level kind of thing. And then even more importantly, then also balance in our personal lives, because we all want to, have a fulfilling life and not feel like, and I make, it's my opinion that my advisor was married to chemistry, but it sure seemed like that was the, what she did, and which is fine. People choose different things, but for me, I didn't want to only have chemistry in my life. So I'm going to talk about these different areas, research, teaching, and service, sort of thinking about some typical expectations, but certainly everyone has, perhaps different levels or percentages of your time that are spent in research, teaching, and service. But a typical expectation level is it's shown here, 45% research, 45% teaching, and then 10% service. And then, one can negotiate with your department chair or your institution on how, if say one semester you have a higher grant load, how to work around that. And then also thinking, like I said, I was a little bit out of atypical, but typically you are, start out as an assistant professor without tenure, and then the promotion to associate comes with tenure. So those are things to, kind of a little background on where I'm coming from. So I'm going to start with talking about research. So, what do you have to do in order to, develop your own research program? And, this definitely is different for different disciplines. Certainly, if you are in the social sciences, maybe you might have a bit of a lab, but it's certainly probably doesn't look like the lab I have for chemistry, which is fine, but really setting up the infrastructure for you to be successful, and it comes with, even before you even get hired, right, is negotiating for space, negotiating for any type of shared equipment, all those kinds of things. But, trying to understand, what does it take for me to be successful in my research? And that can be difficult, particularly if you didn't get a lot of training in that. either in your doctoral program or your postdoctoral program, knowing the things that you actually need access to. And yeah, certainly once you have that position, it can be more difficult to negotiate those things. So, trying to understand what do you need, infrastructure wise in order to do your research. And then definitely someone's got to pay for this research, and it's probably not going to come out of your bank account, or if it does, you have a much better personal life or personal finances than I do. So you're going to need to submit these grant proposals. And so very much time consuming. I know most everyone on this call probably have done a few or a lot of these grant proposals. There's deadlines. There's looking specifically at the proposal call so that everything gets addressed, all those types of things. You want to have folks working with you, in particular students. And so how do you recruit those students? How do you, sort of navigate what makes a good student, what makes a student that you maybe don't want in your research program? And then how do you maintain, their, so that you retain them? Because certainly it takes a lot of your own time to get them up to speed so that they're productive in your lab. And then collaborations are really important. It's difficult to do research only, on your own. And so looking both within your own institution, but also outside of your institution, also understanding, what is for you important in a collaborator. Certainly their perspective on the research, so their discipline or their science, so to speak, but also, how can you work well with this person, trying to sort of tease that out before you maybe even start making, a relationship as a collaborator. And certainly if things aren't working out, how to, pivot and move on to some other collaboration. You definitely have to be writing things up, otherwise it's, it's the whole thing about if the tree falls out in the woods and no one hears it, does it really fall type of thing. You have to get your research out so that others can, see what you're doing and you're really not doing it in a vacuum type of thing. And then one of the difficult things, honestly, as you do all these other things, is to stay current on the literature. So reading other people's work and assessing it and sort of getting an understanding of what's important and what's not. So some of the things, at least in my opinion, that were unexpected research related tasks that I've definitely learned over time, but one of them that I don't think we get much training on as people that are outside of the finance world is budget management. So you get a budget, you have to remember that you have to pay people, and typically they have fringe benefits, so that goes into the costs, the indirect costs that help to keep the lights on in your institution, and all those types of things. Really watching your accounts, understanding how much things cost, all those are things that you really do sort of learn as you go, but they're really important because when you run out of money, I mean, there's a shot you might have to lay off a postdoc or that type of thing. And so you don't want to be in that type of situation, or the opposite is you haven't spent the funding down, assuming you can just bank that money, and perhaps the funding agency says, nope, we're going to take that money back, or we're going to subtract it from your next year's budget. So understanding all those types of things. I definitely got a really good training in that at the Department of Energy lab. I had some really good mentors in that. So the next bullet point I have is just, submission issues. So with whether it's a proposal or a publication, proposals have many pieces and parts to them. And typically, almost always, your institution needs to review and approve your budgets, for example. They can't do that in an hour. So keeping that in mind, so that you're not at the last minute, you know, trying to get something through and, you know, then you miss the deadline. And many, you know, now, especially with online submissions, you know, deadlines are very hard and fast type of thing. Same thing with the publication submissions. There, you know, you write this wonderful manuscript, you go to submit, and boy, all the different things you have to have or not have in order to get those through. Seems like every journal has their own approach to that. So just, you know, sort of navigating those types of things. Definitely managing students is something that I learned. Have a lot of good lessons in that, you know, whether it's them struggling in the classroom, so they really shouldn't be in your lab working and they should be focused on their coursework, or they are not really prepared to do some of the things that you're asking them to do. So having to step back and train students so that, you know, they're able to be successful. And then definitely personal issues. We're all people, we don't always get along. So trying to be able to be fair, and certainly it's difficult. I have 3 biological kids, and being fair to them, it has helped me understand being fair with students. So that's definitely thoughts, and even how many students make sense for your lab, that type of thing. For those of you that maybe don't have to deal with this, but as an analytical chemist, everything breaks. Everything goes down. So once it goes down, okay, how much is it going to cost to fix it? Can I go in and fix it myself? Is there someone in the department that can help me do this? But in keeping, you know, maintenance is really important so that you minimize those times that things go down. But, you know, just having to deal with that, especially when you're at a deadline type of thing. And then again, perhaps many of you don't deal with this as much, but safety issues. You know, the fact that, so I had a student who looks at beer, and with the beer, it turns out that people put glycol in it for a little thickening, and he was doing a digest with nitric acid, and it turned into TNT or something terrible, and boom, type of thing. So thinking through, I mean, you don't want to get anyone hurt. So, you know, making no assumptions with safety is pretty important type of thing. So I'm going to stop there before we move to teaching. Does anyone have any comments or questions at this point? All right, if not.
Just Jani, I'm just
Yeah.
glad that I don't work with combustible ingredients in my work.
Yeah, no, that was kind of a new one. I mean, we do uranium, which some people we don't even want to walk in the lab. But I always tell people, I think it's much more safe in my lab than going into the beauty shop where they have no hoods and they're doing all kinds of nail work, and you just practically get knocked over by the fumes. So, but it's definitely, you know, chemistry is fun, right? All right, so I'm going to move to teaching. So in teaching, then it depends on what the types of things that you're teaching, whether it's a lecture or in the sciences, a lab. But, you know, really understanding what the content, not that you think is important necessarily, but really your discipline thinks is important. I think that's something that we really have to keep in mind, because we're hoping and assuming that our students get the content needed to move forward in whatever discipline or career path that they're interested in. So, you know, determining that, and that definitely is working with other colleagues in the area is really important. And then depending on your institution, understanding the academic backgrounds of students, and in general, you need to understand that, but it's very different if you're at a public institution versus a private institution that perhaps has very high standards, for lack of better terms, for allowing students to come in. So, you know, understanding that, you know, perhaps their math skills aren't going to be quite what you would hope. And so sort of working with that situation type of thing. And then if you do teach courses where there's multiple sections, it's important to coordinate with the other folks that are teaching those sections. Again, kind of going back to the content, but making sure that there is some uniformity in what's being offered. Oftentimes it even means joint exams and those types of things, or at least trying to keep the pace of the course pretty similar type of thing. So so there's a lot of coordination there. And then knowing that, you know, you teach something the first time and yeah, it's probably not the best, right? And so how to then improve those lectures and labs over time. Definitely, you know, the student feedback is really helpful. So it's really important to read those evaluations, as painful as that might be, to really understand that. And then definitely staying current on the content as things change. In my world, I teach the instrumental analysis class. And so chemical instrumentation is constantly improving, which, you know, praise the Lord, we get to do better science that way, but I need to be up on that. So I'm not talking about, you know, things that I learned in graduate school that maybe don't necessarily get used anymore. So some of the unexpected teaching tasks, for sure, the administration or administrative issues with students, all the emails, all the students who come to your, you know, your office at the final hour to say, I really need an A in this class when they really have a D type of thing. We actually were interviewing a lecturer today, and she is doing some teaching even with her finishing up her doctoral degree, and she talked about how, you know, the same questions from, you know, multiple students, and if you have a class of 150, that it gets frustrating type of thing. The next one is, I think, very critical in that setting these very clear expectations for the students. I think there's nothing more frustrating to a student when the expectations are moving during the semester. And so just, you know, making it clear to yourself what the expectations are so that the students are pretty much on board from the first day of class type of thing. I don't know about the University of Arizona, but up here we have been asked in the last few years that our syllabi and our courses have very clear learning objectives, which I would say we do, but they, at least here at NAU, they want them in a specific type of format and that kind of thing. So folks that, you know, the powers that be, so to speak, you know, wanting to see things written out almost like a lesson plan or something like that, which honestly, not sure if any of us got a whole lot of instruction on how to do that. So, you know, it's kind of navigating that. Definitely, like I said, you need to read those student evaluations, but interpreting them is also important. In my opinion, if you get a very small number of your students, say less than 25% of the students filling out the evaluations, those are going to be the students that hate you as an instructor, perhaps hate you as a person. And so they're going to go after you on those evaluations. And so you're really not going to get a very good understanding of what the class in general. So my approach has been to get at least 75% of the students in the class filling out the evaluations. And the way I do it is I just tell them if it gets to 75%, then everyone gets a couple extra points, extra credit points. You know, the whole class does, because you certainly don't see who fills those out. But I don't think I've ever gotten less than 75%. So, and you know, you get some that people don't leave any comments or anything, but at least you're getting, you know, sort of the Likert scale look at what they thought about the class. And that does help you then to see, hopefully you can see some themes. Sometimes, you know, there's definitely going to be a few students who didn't like the class, which is fine. But if the majority of the students are saying over and over and over, Dr. Ingram went too fast, her, she read off her PowerPoints or whatever the case might be. I mean, those are really important comments that you want to take into consideration. And then I've done this a few times, but when you have to teach different courses, so not the same class material in the same semester. So trying to keep that straight almost in your own mind, this class we're doing this, and this class we're doing this other thing. And so, how to be, I guess, strategic in terms of teaching, two different lectures. Particularly, I used to teach them back to back, so that's also a little difficult. So, all right, so that's my little teaching spiel. Does anyone have any comments on that? Questions?
So Jani, 75% seems like a really high bar to try to achieve on student feedback. I don't think I've ever passed 50% on mine. And you don't get the sense that, I guess I've had this mental struggle about offering extra credit points to do something like answer survey. Maybe
yeah. That's the only way I can get it to work. And it's near the end of the semester, so some of them are desperate. So they actually think it's going to make a big difference. And typically the way it really, in the end, the math turns out, it doesn't make much of a difference, but it is that carrot that they, that they'll go after. So, I haven't figured out another way. The only other way that I've done it, and that's more in the lab, is they can't check out of their lab drawer until they fill out the survey. So, somehow like kind of forcing the issue, but I just, a majority is so much better, than like I said, even 50%. So Naomi wrote that she offered bonus points on the last exam, and she gets about, get at least a 75% response rate. So, you might try it.
Yeah, no, I think I will. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I know for a bit they were very, at least at NAU, they were talking about they didn't want that to be part of the student evaluation was extra credit. And so when I first came, they were paper copies. So someone from our departmental office would come in the last 10 minutes of one of your class and hand out a paper copy. And so of course you got much better response then, but then someone had to type it in and all that kind of stuff. And so they went to the online. And so for that, I just felt like it's pretty important. So, and at least at NAU, I'm not sure at the University of Arizona, but those student evaluations are some of the only assessment of your teaching. And so, you don't want to do soft things in order to get really good evals, because you'll also get dinged on having all A's or all A's and B's in the class. But there's not a lot of ways that we get assessed for our teaching, at least up here. So having a pretty good survey of the class, I think, is really important. So let's see. So Heather asks, how do you know which students completed the eval? I only see summary reports without student identifications. I don't know, so I give the whole class. So every single student, so that's the one thing is they get, like every single student will get a couple points because I tell them I can't see this, that type of thing. So like the one I have right now, there's 30 students and I have 27, so I feel really good about that. So yeah, how many points do you typically offer? 2 or 3? Yeah, like sometimes it'll be like 5, but it's actually not 5 because it goes in, for example, into the total of their homework grade. And so then the homework grade gets normalized to 100, let's say. So it's not, you don't want to offer a whole lot, but definitely I think a couple points towards a total is certainly a big enough carrot for students to do it. Because like I said, it's at the prime end of the semester that students think anything and everything they can do to improve their grade is, going to be helpful. So, all right, and I'm going to come back to research and teaching in a few slides, but Anything else on the teaching thing for right now?
Amanda has another question. She joined a little bit late, but she asked, are there differences in teaching expectation commitments between NAU and U of A? Does it depend on your department?
So differences between, let's see. Okay. Are there differences? So my guess is yes, in terms of the differences in expectations for teaching at the two institutions. But maybe Ron, you can chime in here. Here at NAU, if you were hired as a tenure track person, you're expected, even if you have an expectation of say 60% research, 30% teaching, you still need to show that you're a decent teacher. When I was on the promotion and tenure committee for the my college, our dean said NAU is known as, it has been known and still is known as a teaching place. People need to be able to teach to stay here, partly because sometimes when people get tenure, they sort of, their research productivity drops off. And so if they're a poor teacher, this is not good for the institution. So, and it does depend on your department. It depends also on your grant, at least at NAU, how, you know, what level of grant work that you have. And so you can sort of decrease the teaching expectations if you have increased your grant work. So I don't know, Ron, at U of A.
I would say it's very similar at the U of A. You know, you're expected to do teaching, you're expected to get good evaluations, and where it's really critical. And I'm on the P&T committee here for the College of Medicine. So if you're going to go from an assistant to associate professor, those teaching evaluations that you got from the students, they're going to be discussed quite heavily by the committee and really reflect on your promotion.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense, right? We are universities with student focused work. And so that it does become important kind of thing. So I hope that answered your question, Amanda. All right, so I'm going to move on to service. So service is typically at 10%, sometimes it's even as low as 5%, but it's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different activities that you might be involved with. So as it says, there's a lot of diversity. You can have service on the department level, at your college, the university, nationally, even internationally. I don't have that there. And so it can look like, you know, serving on committees, but it also can look like reviewing proposals or manuscripts, or even applications, maybe on for recruitment, those types of things. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can serve. And so also serving on either thesis or dissertation committees that for students that are not your own students. All right. So some of the things that are unexpected is definitely this big one, the time it takes. How much time am I devoting to these various different service activities? And what does that mean for my research and teaching type of thing? Also, sort of deadlines or times of years for the service. So for example, like I said, I was on the promotion and tenure committee here at NAU, and pretty much the month of November is almost a daily meeting kind of thing. If you're not meeting, you're reviewing people's applications. But the rest of the time, so, you know, December to October, you really have no responsibilities. So you just need to know that there's going to be on some types of service related things, you know, a time that it's just going to be heavy. And so it's not going to be, you know, a little bit over the course of time. Travel. So travel is definitely something if you get on a study section, say for the National Institute of Health, or for some kind of advisory committee, there's a lot of things that you don't think you might have to travel right now. Everything seems to be Zoom, but I was on a study section for the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, so NIGMS, and we met 3 times a year. So that was typically going to Washington, DC. And then we also did site visits for different programs, which then that could add another 2 or 3 trips to different parts of the country to, review these programs. And so that became a lot of travel. So it's just something you want to keep in mind. Another thing is if you get involved in, say, a professional organization, if you're, say, serving as a board member or on a committee or something, you probably are going to be expected to travel as well. So political issues I have here, definitely there are asks of you to be on different service, say, committees. And sometimes politically, it's probably wise to say yes, just because you're going to maybe get kudos or little positive marks with the powers that be that can perhaps help you to go forward in your career. But there's also things where maybe it's something that you want to learn a little bit more about. For example, being on, say, an institutional committee that's actually making decisions on the mission of the institution or those types of things. And do you have the background to be on this committee? Because it could get controversial. Okay, so it's just things to think about. For myself, I served on the committee that, not this recent one, but our last president. So those of you at NAU can throw rocks at me if you want, because I did serve on that committee. And then how long am I committed to this service activity? Okay, and again, thinking more about committees, but are there terms? Is there, is it an expectation that you're going to serve on this committee for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or for the rest of your life kind of thing? And so trying to get that understanding is really important. And then the last one happens for a lot of different people, but honestly, often for people from underrepresented groups, is that people say they need some diversity, for example, on the committee, and so therefore you are the diversity. And so you have to be very cautious about that because, again, it might go back to this political thing, oh, this would probably be good for me. Well, if you're serving on, 10, 20 committees, goes back to the time, you're just not going to have time to be able to do things. And so you really have to evaluate these requests. And also, we'll talk a little bit about this in a few slides, but maybe you serve for a couple years and then you say, you know what, I need to move on. I would like to do something else and I can't do both type of thing. So, all right, with that, any questions, comments on service?
Sure, this is Ron again. So at the U of A, service on national committees like AACR or the American Society for Cell Biology is really important because when you're going to get promoted from an associate professor to a professor, you have to have demonstrated national and international reputation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Plus, it builds your network, right? You start to meet people through those committee assignments or through those service activities. Amanda in the chat says, does work/engagement with tribal communities count as service? Work that is not research related, but can help with relationship building. For example, serving on tribal research review board or other work, group/volunteer work. Totally yes. Yes. And it's something that, again, in that scope of 10% of your time, thinking about how much time you're taking to do that. But it really, it's again, even, I guess, to Ron's point, in a different way, but it can build your networks. It can build those relationships and trust. So I would say yes. I mean, and even depending on your discipline, for example, even serving on, like your kids' PTO or parent teacher organization, that type of thing, if you are involved with the schools, right? And somehow in your research, because making those connections is huge. I know when my kids were in school, you know, doing different things, and then with some of the proposals that we've written, oh yeah, I know the counselor at this school, and so when I send an email, I can, you know, have a better connection to those folks. So thinking about service beyond the walls of the academic world, I think is really important. It could be even with some of the local industry, you know, for example, doing things at here in Flagstaff at WL Gore, or with the USGS folks, because again, it sort of is a way to build your networks. So that's a good question. All right, let's see. Julie asked, can you talk a bit more about how you decide on which committees to sit on? Yeah, that's a good. So, and for me, I've learned this over time, but is to really look at, this sounds selfish, but it should be, is what is in it for me? Are there people that are on this committee or potential people that you could see on this committee that it would be great to get to know them, again, to build your networks, potential collaborations, right? Or can I learn something? So that's really important with any type of like study section or whatever, where you're reviewing proposals, because you learn so much when you review other people's proposals, and at the same time you're doing service. So looking at it that way. Another thing that I have learned to do is to ask, what is the time commitment? And you know, trying to get a realistic time commitment. Am I on this advisory group and I'm going to meet once or twice a year? Okay, that's not so bad. Am I on this advisory group and I'm going to meet every week? Oh Lord, you know, I got asked to be on this at NAU. They're changing the curriculum to add more diversity aspects to it, which I think is great. But this committee was going to meet every Friday for 2 to 3 hours. I was like, that is my service commitment right there. So, you know, I said no, that's not going to be possible, type of thing. So trying to get that type of information is really important. But I've really learned over time, like I said, what can I benefit from this service commitment? For example, I was asked when I first came to be on 2 search committees for the construction management group, because so they're searching for tenure track faculty, because at NAU it's a rule, it's required that there be a female and a underrepresented person on those committees. And so with Dr. Ingram, you get a double token, right? And so this person called me, and I started thinking, their students don't even take chemistry courses. I couldn't think of any reason I would need to network with folks in the construction management group. And I was already on a search committee. So I said, you know, I politely said no. And the guy got really angry because he just needed his people to be, you know, certain type of people to be on these committees. Anyway, I ended up hanging up on this person. I felt very proud of myself after I did that. But, you know, trying to understand again, what is it? What kinds of things can I benefit? Or is it something that I think needs to go forward? I am passionate about, you know, maybe it's a diversity issue or something like that. Then totally go for it, but you might have to step off of something else. So trying to remember 10% is not a lot of time, right? Out of a 40-hour week, what is it, 4 hours? Is that right? Am I doing the math right? So it's just not a lot of time. So, okay, anything else? Oh, we got another chat. Oh, she said thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move to talking a little bit about trying to achieve this Hozho thing, trying to achieve balance. How can I, you know, what are some tricks of the trade, so to speak? And so we'll start with research. So one of the things that I did learn, it took me a few years, but is to really try and focus your research efforts on things that are fundable. Okay, if you want to do something that maybe you're going to compete against the best of the best, that you might have a difficult time getting funding, you might want to sort of slightly pivot to something else, but also is of interest to you. Okay, and the second one kind of goes with that, in not getting too diluted and pursuing too many projects, which right now I think I am not doing that very well. Okay, but when I first came to NAU, it was exciting to have as much freedom as there was compared to the Department of Energy lab. And so I would have students come in, and I remember I had a student who just had gotten a tattoo. And so we wanted to look at why tattoo colors fade over time. I had no background in this, but we went down that path along with trying to do the tribal contaminant kind of work, trying to do some pesticide work out in the forest. I mean, I was going in way too many directions. And so I guess what I'm saying is that you probably are not going to just have one project, but trying to see how these projects might interact and sort of weave together so that they make sense, and there's, you know, some things that you're leveraging off of something else, as opposed to buying tattoo ink on the internet and going out and collecting pine needle samples. I mean, very different things. So the next thing, which I think is also something that I've learned over time, is to have a process for recruiting your students and selecting them. You know, and it might be even having them shadow a bit and see if they even show up, if they're engaged. Maybe it is almost having a semester worth of probationary, you know, there's not going to be a heavy commitment by you to them. Maybe you're not going to pay them the first semester, just to see if they really are interested. I know many of you probably have had the same thing where students seem interested, but really they just want this on their resume. They aren't really that interested in the work that you're doing. And then how you really, you know, sort of deal with these issues of whether it's personality conflicts or students that, you know, maybe are too timid to ask questions, so make a bunch of mistakes, you know, whatever that case might be, but really trying to have sort of a process in place, because those things are going to happen, definitely going to happen. So the next bullet point for myself is sometimes if I don't have a deadline, I tend to put those things on the back burner. And a lot of times manuscripts are the things that fall into that case. Proposals have deadlines. The semester has a deadline. You know, even a lot of committees have deadlines that you have to meet. And so trying to make deadlines for yourself in terms of manuscript submission. I know many of you are involved with the writing accountability groups, and that for me has helped quite a bit as well, because knowing that I'm gonna say this is my goal, and then to have to go to the next week and either decide to lie or say I didn't meet it doesn't sit well, either one. And so just trying to get those deadlines, because probably you know, it's probably pretty even, but grants and manuscripts is really what, in terms of the research, shows your success or not success. And so having, you know, those manuscripts in process and getting them out the door is really, really important. So I talked a little bit about this with service, but really accepting reviewer invitations is so helpful in terms of really understanding how to write a good proposal, how to write a good manuscript. And so, you know, you want to be careful and not accept too many, because it is very time consuming, particularly if you kind of try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, as in, I hope the reviewer who's reading my proposal is truly reading it and not skimming it and doing, you know, a subpar job. But you do learn so much about a lot of the aspects that you just don't think about, in terms of a lot of times we're just so focused on the science, right? And so things like letters of support, if they all read the same, you're like, this doesn't seem that supportive, that type of thing. So just getting those opportunities if you can, type of thing. In terms of the budgets and really just life in general, is trying to keep good records of, you know, what did you spend, even what did you spend it on? So for example, in my lab, they're, you know, trying to get the catalog number of the filters that we use is very important. And I don't know how many times, I mean, I've spent on for us, it's called VWR, but it's, you know, the group that sells things, trying to find the syringe that we like or use. So trying to keep that information, you know, pretty quick to be able to grab so that you are able to, you know, be as efficient as possible. Same thing with, you know, the presentations. Over time, you know, we at least probably down at U of A too, you do your accomplishments, and trying to remember back in, you know, February, I think I gave a talk, where was it? You know, that type of thing. So trying to keep track of it as you go, type of thing. And then definitely seeking advice from leaders in your field or people that you respect. I think that's really, really important, because there are a lot of good tricks to the trade, honestly. And so it's good to, you know, sort of, you know, pick at people's brains and see what are some of the ways that you have been able to, you know, navigate different issues. All right, so I'm going to move to teaching, but any comments on, you know, thoughts? I don't know if anyone else has some good advice in terms of how to really be efficient and successful in your research.
I think it's just hard to do, Jani. And it takes practice.
It does. It does.
Yeah,
It does.
Yeah, my
seem,
first year was terrible.
yeah, but it does seem like it also is a snowball thing, right? And once you get that first one, then it can translate into the next one and into the next one, type of thing. So getting that first one is definitely, you know, in terms of a grant. So yeah, that's what Naomi says, manuscripts are my kryptonite. So yeah, I mean, it's, and then the other thing I didn't put on here is you have to put your big boy pants on and handle rejection, and try not to take it personally. Try to understand, how do I go back to the same journal or this same, you know, group of funders? Do I pivot and find a better way? You know, you really have to sort of take your personal feelings, which is so hard because we throw so much into this, but to figure out how, and know that you're going to get rejected. I mean, if you don't get rejected, I don't know, we need to touch you or something like that. But just know that's part of this crazy job that we have. And know that when you read the reviewer comments, sometimes it just boils your blood, because you have stuff in there that they just did not read. So also trying to write that reviewer response without getting snarky, you know. So sometimes you need someone else to read it and say, yeah, you need to take it down a notch or two, kind of thing. But just, you know, those are the types of things that you have to be able to handle in this crazy job that we have. So, all right, so I'm going to move to teaching. So teaching, there's definitely some things I think that you can make your life a little easier. The first one is, hopefully you can get other colleagues to give you their course materials, whether it's their PowerPoints, whether it's some notes, whether it's some of their resources. Definitely reach out. It's so much easier to tweak something besides a blank piece of paper, right? And so I think that can be just super helpful. The other thing that I had a colleague that did this, and it was more changing the expectations. So it says, do not try to change lectures labs midway, but really it was the expectations. So deciding, oh, I think it would be better if the students did, you know, this project with 2 weeks left in the semester or whatever. It's just really, you know, you want to say, okay, I think this could be done better. and I will do it the next time I teach this course type of thing. You know, there's sometimes you do have to change things. For example, we all got that taste spring 2020 where we went online, but for the most part, it really is going to kill your evaluations for sure. And it's not fair to the students. So, you know, just take notes so that then the next time you teach it, you can improve. But, you know, you kind of, once you set that syllabus and once you set those expectations, you know, you've got to work toward that. Definitely think about what you're assigning in terms of grading. So in a perfect world, if you are in a discipline where there's a lot of writing, and then you have, you know, you're going to review their writing, give feedback, and go on and on and on. You know, think about how much time that's going to take. And sure, I always think about the good, better, and best. And sometimes there's best, but if you have 150 students, you might have to go for better or good type of thing. So just thinking about your time and having to grade, and knowing that a lot of students have a really hard time putting together a sentence. And so having to reread things. And so just evaluating those types of things. And that's definitely with experience as well. Maybe I don't need to assign 20 homework problems, maybe 10 is really sufficient, that type of thing. And then trying to negotiate with whoever it is, your chair or even your dean. But if you are assigned to teach more than one lecture a semester or one lab, trying to get the same course, but multiple sections. And so that way you're not having to prep two very different courses. And I think especially for people that are pre-tenure, that should be a no-brainer for your chair. I hope it is anyway. You know, it's a little bit difficult if, for example, I teach classes that there's only one section. So that makes it difficult, but really trying to negotiate so you're not doing a lot of prep for a lot of different courses. And trying to get the same course that you taught the previous semester or semesters so that you can improve it, but you also have already that set of slides or lectures that you're building on as opposed to starting from scratch. Super important. And then definitely asking for assistance. So, you know, they'll just say no if there's not the support or the funding there, but to request either lecture TAs or lab TAs, student instructors, you know, anything that can, any students that can really assist you in teaching is a big plus. You know, grading kind of things. Sometimes it's just the grading, which is at least something. You know, you can find parts of the exam that, you know, are pretty straightforward for someone else to grade. Having a student teaching assistant in the course and being available to also have office hours. And sometimes students are much more comfortable with more of a peer than they are with an instructor. So just thinking through those types of things. So any thoughts or any other hints or things that might be, you know, this people use that I didn't mention that, you know, the group might be able to take advantage of?
Yeah, Jay, I'm kind of in your boat where I teach these single section classes. So I don't, you know, and they're big, but being able to teach them at least every year does help, so I don't have to come up with new prep. The pandemic has changed things because I definitely saw, you know, student involvement drop off last year. And then this year, you know, we're back in the classroom and I was expecting to see it go back up, but in fact, it didn't really go as well as I thought it was going to. So
Right.
It's still a little bit mysterious right now. So I'm waiting for that new normal to set in, I suppose.
Right. And that's another thing I think, as you know, the instructor, we definitely can set the parameters. I've talked to some of my colleagues that with, you know, going totally online and then moving back to the expectation is this, you know, students are coming to class type of thing. And yet well, this student was sick or got exposed to COVID or whatever. And so then slowly the class becomes back to a majority online and not very many people in the classroom, which I don't know about you all, but to me, that's the worst, is to have sort of this mix, because it's really difficult to teach to Zoom land and in-person land all at the same time. So just trying to be as firm as whatever you decide, makes the most sense, because as we know, students will push and push and push type of thing. And so, trying to be as accommodating as it makes sense, but, really not having to, get to the point where you feel like, we might as well be Zooming, which I don't know about you all, but I hate lecturing to my computer type of thing. So
Yeah, the Zoom was hard. So what I did, I sort of carried out what you said. I was firm in the very beginning, and it does help that the institution made it very clear that the expectation was in class,
right.
so that I could really talk about, hey, I'll stream my lectures, but understand that's an accommodation. And I'm not recording them. It's not on demand. You have to, log in at the certain time, and you don't have easy access to ask questions. So I would use that as kind of my way to encourage them to come to class. I was, I'd say I was averaging about 80% attendance, which out of 130 people, that seemed okay. It could have been a lot better, but the good part is I didn't get a lot of complaints during the semester, but time will tell what the surveys look like, right?
Right. No, I totally agree. Yeah. And that can be, it can be difficult, the pushback. And that's where it's good to have your chair understanding if there are some issues, so that when the student goes over your head and to the chair, that they are already understanding, that they have your back, essentially. So I think that's really important, because they don't want to be surprised by some of this stuff either. So, all right, so I'm going to move to the service. So we talked a little bit about this. So choosing assignments, really, like I said, I think you got to take a little bit of a selfish bent on this and say, what's in it for me? Or like I said, it kind of goes with that, but is this something that's super important to me? And so I am actually willing to do this, a bit on my own time. So, but you want to make that a firm decision, because otherwise you get bitter, right? You get mad that you're having to spend all this time doing something that you really aren't getting a lot of credit for, because as we're sort of know, service is a very small part of your expectation. And so it really doesn't play a huge role in getting you tenure, even though sometimes people try to make it seem that way. Here at NAU, my understanding is they're trying to increase the what would you say, in the tenure decision, increase the service proportion in terms of just that it is important if it's tied to the university's mission. So for example, Amanda made the comment about the tribal relationship. That would totally fit that, right? So, but we'll see that the promotion and tenure people have to be convinced of that too. So, so Julie made the comment, being selfish often benefits the institution as well, which is really true, because you then again are building your networks, learning, meeting new collaborators, that type of thing. So, but for those of you that are perhaps in that token category, you have to be super careful, because there really are, it seems, more opportunities for folks like myself than for maybe my colleague that is from the majority population and the other gender. So, and like I said, really try to pin down the time commitment. And if people are pretty loose on that, or they actually make it seem like there's not much time, you might ask someone who actually serves on that committee to get a realistic time frame for what that service means, because that's a huge part of it. It can just speed up a lot of your day, and you're really, you know, getting other things are getting put aside, like writing a manuscript type of thing. And then this one I am not so good at, but, you know, stand in the mirror and say, no, 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 no. You really need to learn to say no to service, or at least to say, you know, in order for me to do this, I need to clear my plate a little bit. So I need to drop some other commitments. And when we talked about this at ACES, I thought one of my colleagues from Northeastern made a very good comment that use your chair, use your dean, get them on your side, and you know, have them say, well, you know, I would love to do that, but my chair, you know, has told me I need to be doing these things in order to, you know, move my tenure forward. Difficult thing is it when it's your chair asking you, or your dean asking you, or your provost asking you, which I've had that happen to me too. I could probably bring this up. Our old provost, Dr. Hunicke, who was a dear friend, she was telling me to be very careful with my service. I was doing too much service, and then turned around and asked me to be on a committee. So, but you do really need to learn to say no and to really evaluate, as this next one, you know, what is your service that year? Do I need to make some changes? Do I need to step off a committee? Do I need to, you know, just maybe even change, maybe you're chairing a committee and saying, you know, I'll remain on this committee, but I cannot chair, because we all know as a chair of a committee, you know, you're organizing the meetings, you're doing a lot more work than folks that are, you know, just part of that committee. So it's just really important, I think, to think about it that way, is to really evaluate your service every year. So, all right, any comments or thoughts on service?
Is there like a calculator that committees use for what counts as too little or too much, or is it really you just got to kind of do a couple things here or there?
It partly is, I think Ron made this point, it depends on the prestige is probably not the right word, but so what, as let's say a leader in your field, are you doing only service that is within your department? That's probably not the best strategy for you. So I always think about it a little bit in terms of maybe having a bit of service in a few different areas. Certainly, if you don't have any service within your department, your colleagues are going to be mad at you. So everyone needs to pitch in a little bit, and perhaps maybe doing something at the college or the university level. But you do want to think about service in terms of also outside of your institution, so that you can start to build a bit of a reputation. And it's oftentimes done through the service work, because let's say you're volunteering with your professional society, so then you're going to get to know those people, or with the National Institute of Health or NSF or that type of thing. So even though maybe the time that you spend is the same as you would, let's say, in a departmental committee, you know, it's really, you know, what exactly is that, and how is that helping kind of your professional development? So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you get a stipend or an honorarium, does that count as service then? Because like grant reviewing.
Yeah, no, it's still service.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still service kind of thing. And so, yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, you probably put in way more time than your hourly rate, so to speak, with a lot of that type of service, but it is sort of a token of our appreciation type of thing. So, but yeah, it still would be considered service. All right, any other comments?
Jani?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think for me, I would just also say that learning to say no, I think, is definitely something really working on. I mean, setting boundaries, even my work with tribal communities, Navajo Nation, you know, different programs, and then some of my work with schools. And I guess where it's hard to say no is there's no help either, you know, so I'm like, really, it's tough. So, so I think this is definitely an area where I need to, I keep telling myself anyway, like you said, look in the mirror and say no, or figure ways, I guess kind of how to set those boundaries, but it's tough when, for example, like some of the schools where I have some projects, you know, ongoing research projects, they don't have school nurses, and they're asking for input, you know, on some of maybe their policies, whatever, you know.
Right.
And that takes time. So, but yeah, thank you for, I guess, sharing this, and it's definitely a huge challenge that I think I'm dealing with.
Right.
Ways to navigate it.
Right. So another piece of advice that someone gave me was never say yes right away. Is really to ask those questions. What's the time commitment? Is there travel involved? Those types of things, and really give it a few days, maybe even bounce it off your chair or a colleague or your husband. I've had my husband be like, are you kidding me? What are you thinking? You know, that type of thing. And so you do have time, and you know, the guilt, because you're right. Sometimes people will be like, but we really need you. It's like, you know, you really have to be able to say, you know, I'm very honored by your request, but I just cannot do that right now, type of thing. So, but I have been using the whole don't say yes right away type of thing. It does help because there's a lot of times information that comes in, or talking to, like I said, a colleague, and you know, either they say, oh yeah, no, that is a really great committee, that's a great one to be on, or don't, you know, run type of thing. So I think that can be helpful, you know, kind of thing. So, but I totally agree. I think, you know, you know him, my middle son, Josh, he's amazing at saying no. I mean, he does things that he's passionate about, and he does not do things that he doesn't want to do. And I keep thinking, I need to be like Josh, because I'm too easily, you know, guilted into things. I guess that might be the term. So, but definitely, yeah, take some time, and really, like I said, you can use the whole mom and dad thing with your chair or your dean to say, well, you know, that seems like a great opportunity, but my chair has said I really need to focus on this or that. So whether it's true or not, I don't know. Maybe it's a little white lie. I don't know. So, all right, any other comments?
Yeah, this is Ron again. So the students in my lab gave me a button that I could wear, and the button said, no way. And they were complaining about how many committees that I was on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if nothing else, you just stick it up there.
Yes.
So
It's one of my treasures.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, I mean, there's probably with most service invites, there's probably some good things about it, but you know, again, you need to be able to go to the bathroom during the day, right? You need to be able to eat lunch a little while, and you know, those kinds of things. So you really have to get yeah, you're that Hozho thing, right? Otherwise you're going to be totally balanced out on the service. So so this is just some final thoughts. You know, definitely talk to people, find out what areas are weighed more in terms of that tenure decision, because you really don't want to be surprised when you get some letter that says, oh, spent way too much time teaching, or whatever the case might be. So understand that as best as you can. I know it's a little bit of a mystery, but you know, trying to get as many opinions as you can is a good thing. This evaluation of, you know, what are you using? Where is your time going? And, you know, just trying to think about that. If nothing else, it's that year-end accomplishment, putting that together and sort of, you know, evaluating then, wow, I prepped this new class, that was great, but whew, took a lot of time, type of thing. And, you know, definitely don't beat yourself up over making mistakes or failures. If you've chosen a collaborator that you just can't work with, you know, you got to move on. You got to figure out how to move on. You don't want to be, have that as a frustration in addition to, you know, all the little frustrations or big frustrations, you know, not getting funded, not getting a manuscript accepted right away, you know, all those types of things. Definitely find ways in your professional activities to have fun, to enjoy them. You know, for example, I served on this NIGMS group for 6 years. 6 years is a long time, but I love those people. I looked forward to the committee meetings because it was just a great group of people, and I really close friends to this day. This woman and I, you know, if we're making a really great dinner with a glass of wine, we'll snap a picture and send it to one another and that type of thing. So you definitely want to enjoy things. And again, if you're on a committee that you just don't really like the people, you know, that's a service thing. You can certainly substitute something else for that type of thing. And then ask questions, you know, very important, particularly with the service, but also even the teaching, you know, understanding what, you know, what are the students that I'm going to be, you know, having in the class, what is their backgrounds, you know, do you tend to get a lot of emails from this student group, those types of things, just so you can sort of gauge the time that you're gonna, you know, it's gonna need to be able to do a good job. And then definitely, hopefully you all have support groups, you know, colleagues, friends, family, but people that are going to give you some moral support and people that are going to tell you, like Ron said, you know, his students are saying, no, don't do it. Don't, you know, you really need that, because it, again, trying to find that balance is really important. And sometimes you're in the thick of things and you really can't, you know, you can't see that you're totally tilted in one way or another. So getting a support group, I think, is really important. So I think that's my last slide. Anyone have any parting comments on this? So certainly there are many days that my Hozho is definitely not good, but I think it's really important to continue to, you know, evaluate and think about things so that you do have balance in your life, because you know, it makes us much cheerier people, happier people. So I think that's really important. So, but anyway, well, I hope everyone has a good end of the semester and gets their Hozho in place so that they can have a good, you know, holiday break.